Y entonces la agenda principalmente desde el día de hoy, agradeciéndole también a quienes nos están viendo desde Zoom, iniciamos rápidamente con la presentación del proyecto, es decir, en qué consiste el proyecto o en qué consiste, porque el proyecto continúa por 3 años más. Entonces es una presentación rápida del proyecto. Luego vamos a tener 3 organizaciones que van a estar presentando también algunas de presentación de la Fundación BASA, de la estrategia de comunicación para la prevención y autocuidado de VIH con enfoque de vulnerabilidad, que la estrategia se llama Te Cuidamos. Pasamos a una presentación de la organización Red Somos, y ahí vamos a pasar a la presentación de los resultados, ahora sí, de este proceso, específicamente en Colombia. Ya más adelante vamos a contar esto un poquito. Y a las 3:20 vamos a finalizar con un panel en el que la idea es que pensemos.
So I'm going to proceed with our final panel, conclusions and farewell. So we shall commence with the presentation. With the presentation of the project, open hands of Caterina Gonzalez Uribe, Associate Professor of University of Buenos Aires, as well as me with that leader.
Todas, a todos.
Good afternoon to each and every one of you. I really love being able to greet all of you. We've had some conversations amongst each other. And we are part of this day which will
Mío, ¿cierto? ¿Está bien? Igual sí. Espero que eso no nos moleste mucho. Es muy importante que en la academia podamos tener eso.
I want to let you say the listening to point out what we have and continue with that. We can understand what is strictly necessary. We can have this conversation. So I want to talk to you about our main leader on this leader wanted to have amongst the different countries. That is why everything that we see here is going to be done so that we can all hear regardless of where you are. And we're going to talk about physical health in here. We're also going to work on a medicine basis with different sociologists and technologists and other research that has all been focused on health and technology. And of course, we want to have a positive impact on the field and information. We know that not everything had an answer immediately, but of course, we needed to think about how we could proceed with taking a step further, how we can look at the implications regarding data collection, which takes time, and that we sat down in different spaces and opportunities. But again, we talk not necessarily more about quality and quantity, but we talk about also inclusion and respect and measuring what we need to. And the things that are inevitable. So we're going to, for example, look at that. What is digital health? And here, look, there's not a single definition. We've had 2 examples here for all of those present. On the left-hand side, we have our own, and on the left-hand side, we have the who provides. But when we talk about digital health, we have the incorporation of technologies, and we have such as e-health, right? Health, and being able to capture information from your different apps, having a medical history on an electronic file. All of this has to do with technology and information. To define digital health itself is very complex, it's very broad. And so there's no single definition that will be will be no. And that's what we understand for. But I want to understand the use of technology to help improve health and status of people. When we are using, for example, apps, computers, mobile applications, and other tools that we're constantly working on, because this doesn't stop. Every single day, we're having development done. But we don't want to keep going blindly. And we talk about improving health and well-being within a new objective. But we know that that objective is from numerous points of view, not just humanizes the data. This has a lot of points of view. We cannot deny that we are in the face of a phenomenon, something that we could call a new way of operating, not just production for services related to health. It's not a single system. Here we have numerous points, and we see again numerous definitions, including parties, such as others that are contributing to the creation of a network around the people health is. Investments and returns. Pressure is on the fact that we are continuing, and the world has a conversation in this regard more and more. And once we end this conversation, we'll look at all the different ones that I've had. But to talk about what's going on, what can be positive, negative, what we cannot ignore, and we feel sentiment. We must have anticipated and not say, that's not everything we know. We're in the face of something that we will not be able to stop. But we will be able to be prepared and we will be able to moderate. And overall, we want to be able to hit over. Of course, we need to have different moments at court. And when we look at policies, they take a very long time. There's an entire life cycle behind it. And again, policies cannot guarantee that what we want to do will actually function in practice. You have to have other instances and to have information and tools in order to be able to make decisions in the best way possible. So here we summarize what is part of the conversation, what goes along with prioritizing health services when it's under the interest or the control of the very few. As we've seen within these spaces, in addition to that possible limit threat for health, excuse me, the audio seems to be this one focused on numbers.
Siempre se está pensando cosas que van más allá. Y el poder tener esta oportunidad de mirarnos entre países nos va
that we have this opportunity to work not just on a nationwide, but we can broaden other contexts, especially in other languages. This is part of an initial phase that we've had for a transition, and then we'll also look at a second phase here that concludes with to Colombia, but of course maintaining the same protocols. And here we see that it's been involved with the Open Society Network. But because there are so many of us, it's very difficult to stem what the different sources of information are. And this, of course, this says, what were the concepts and investigations on general terms? And so it led to something that we call more precise and detailed digital aspects, but all of them again go back and are hand in hand with technology. And there's a group of people that mentioned. I believe that this question, whichever one of us imagine a home, whichever one of you has a different ideal of home. You stem from experiences, and you're adults, you analyze the economy, you say, who are we leaving this digital footprint on? And even in legislation. Now, I won't talk about the entire methodology, but it's key that you know what went behind all of this. Because of course, what we talk about it, that we can change the way and the space that we have together. I know it's not all together, but as you can see here, we're all working on doing it together. And so we had some episodes here where we looked at different research documents that were revised regarding policies. What did we find in this case? Well, this is something that we're determined to be work on the analysis, looking at human rights. What happens with human rights regulations in Colombia and in other countries? This is what we call, of course, digital norms and digital environments, which we need to share everything with everyone so that we can also get our conversation, be it through social media, WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter. And it's very important to know that you're doing the thing as well. And that you all be part of this conversation, because it is that everyone take part of it. We're using a participative methodology and conversing, reinventing ourselves on form. So those groups here are over 260 different 265 different young adults involved. They're from the age range of 18 to 30 years old, and over 5 different countries. They can be seen as key parties that let us know how interesting this conversation is in different areas. I believe that this presentation is stronger, but we know what it is that we involved. Looking now, there's so much to discuss, but it was.
Hay dificultades para usar esa información. ¿Cuál fue un problema? ¿Cierto? Dependes de alguien. Hay brechas digitales. En más mujeres que hombres pueden acceder a los tener acceso a datos. Va a haber barreras en muchas instancias.
Now we look at what kind of app we would like to have as well. What would we like to use? All of this is what we look into. And well, I want to know and show you what results were obtained in Colombia. So I'm going to give the floor to Javier. And so we're going to give 4 different spaces in which we'll move the floor. And very, very important to know here, if it is present that there's a couple of us here, there are many more that are connected online as well. And every single one of you, of us, are part of spaces in society that are vital. And for me, this has been the main lesson that has been learned. I'm used to doing research in academia and speaking with politicians or policymakers, and I've been far away from thinking on topics such as activism. And I've learned here, and I'm fascinated as well. This is truly the pride of this project, the fact that there are people working on this and saying, wow, how does life change for a person? There are decisions that are on a whole other level, and that's the best and most special part of this project. We're part of a conversation here, and everyone can be here. Well, this is going to be my final slide either ways. Alan's laughing, of course. So what do you think about the fact that we're going to focus on inclusion with everything that we've treated here? And this is going, of course, to lead to a lot more lifespan for the project. We expected that by June, we could formalize this agreement, that it be operational, that our project manager help resolve as well, and that we can continue having these conversations. But in order for us to have a conversation, in order to obtain a better lifespan in this project, then we must work and have these conversations. There are conversations that might be uncomfortable to have, but are required. And the idea here is that, of course, every single one of you take part. Thank you very, very much for coming. And I did state that everyone here, there are numerous people invited throughout other countries. And so the idea is that, of course, you can all feel welcome to our project, regardless of where you may come from. So thank you very much again for your time. And thank you for being here. We're going to look at the presentation. We're going to give the floor to Natalia Sanchez.
Bueno, buenas tardes. Pues primero dar las gracias, obviamente, Catalina no te conocía, pero a Javier y a Sebastián.
I want to start by thanking you, Catalina. I wasn't familiar with you, but I did know Javier and Sebastian, who worked here at the Universidad de los Andes, of course, and we're all gathered here together in order to share. And of course, in this case, Fundación Raza is a state entity found in Medellin, meaning that Ranza's headquarters are in Medellin. However, to be honest, under the current norms that apply, they're nationwide. And so this coverage allows us to broaden ourselves. Now, what happens with Conectate con Teleconecta? This is a strategy that surges within the framework of the sanitary emergency or health emergency. This strategy did not exist before. And this strategy surges as part of a project that receives resources for TB and other illnesses. And RASA is an organization that has a very strong position when it comes to human rights as well and health, including the fact that the right to health is a fundamental human right, and numerous actions that are taken forth are aimed toward HIV patients as well. We also know that within the framework of the health emergency and with the sudden appearance of COVID, all services were focused on that. Pretty much all focus was COVID. So what happened to those that wanted to have a test done? Or what happened to those who received a positive reading in the midst of the pandemic when maybe everything was just focused on COVID? Or what happened to those who lost their jobs, for example, and had to go back to their homes because they had a diagnosis of VIH and their family was not even aware of that? I believe that one way or the other was present, went through one of these situations, or we had someone close to us that went through a region. And so, what is the strategy here? Well, it stems from this health emergency. The idea is that we develop a strategy that be community-based, because of course what we seek is to reach the territories and the different populations through means of digital health, of course. We could not go out, we could not go to emergency services, we could not go to a doctor's appointment, but we also did not clearly understand how the system functions and how we could access such service. And there, base organizations made us become an irrefutable support for extension. That's why this project was done in different cities throughout the country and was developed with community basis aid. Organizations that have been working on HIV, of course, before. This is one of the images that, in a permanent manner, was spread around precisely because it leads to some strategies that were provided. And we would gather, we would manage and distribute medications. We would, of course, work based on different petitions, but all within the digital health framework, virtually in person through means of for example, correspondence, we had numerous solutions done where we found what that truly meant. Someone that maybe does not have a smartphone, for example, could have access to it. Someone who has not a lot of access to the outside world and was locked up. All of this was considered, and we would identify things such as maybe those who do not know how to read or write. Keeping that factor is vital. And we verified not just in elders, but also the populace as a whole. We've looked at specific characteristics to those who might be lacking something. It's something general that we can find.
Continúa por.
Let's move on.
Esta estrategia precisamente que
This strategy also sought the strengthening of the organization on a community basis, but also the learning, teaching, and sharing of knowledge for the population and for the project as a whole. Why? Well, because at the end of the day, the service provided to those who suffer from HIV is not the same. It's, for example, different. Of course, while not removing the importance it may have, but we say, okay, those who had COVID were tended to, they received their services, treatments, medication, and there were some, let's say, prolonging effects that we still fear, but it was a social pressure that cannot remain simply because those who suffer from HIV also have a condition that extends throughout their life. And by identifying that there were certain breaches or gaps, there were difficulties and others, the project ends up going to a school as well for those who were looking into HIV.
inicialmente se pensaba el proyecto del fondo como
Initially
tal,
speaking, it was thought that the project as a whole would identify what we call key populations when it comes to HIV. However, we've also insisted on the fact that it's not just these key populations, because, for example, cisgender women are not part of that key population, yet here we are. So in this regard, well, there are some key populations as a whole for those who require resources that is absolutely necessary for any project. And of course, the idea was to prioritize them. People who have sexual or intimate relations with men, who are homosexual or transgender, all of these are looked at. But we've also looked at community basis as well, where we identified on the importance that we looked at the general population instead. And be it with HIV or otherwise, while understanding that many times the person that approaches and or maybe has inquiries, has studies, or that supports and has a diagnostic, well, most likely does not have their own diagnostic. And that's why it's important for them to learn about it and, of course, proceed from that knowledge.
Estas son unas de las acciones que
These
desarrollamos.
are some of the actions that we developed during the project as a whole. And what we did was look at counseling. People would contact us through means of different organizations and work done in a joint manner with programs and attention done to HIV, with other projects that are within the country that they may be found, etc. So that once there, we could identify if there was a barrier, then we could be contacted by those who needed us. How did we do this? Through means of social media. We had a form that would allow us to systematize information, which is what Catalina mentioned a while ago. So where is that record left? All done with privacy measures. And of course, with the equipment, we would sign different agreements in which the confidentiality of people would not be afflicted in the slightest. This is a territory that manages resources here in Colombia. And so we also have a platform known as Cisco. It's a platform where you can register all of the information for actions performed regarding sexual health and reproductive health, while of course seeking evidence, seeking support, or systematization of the information, which I believe is one of the mistakes that we may have within some of the organizations. which is that systematization of information. It lacks quite a bit. And we had access to that platform before. So the information is protected, stored away, and updated in a permanent manner. This strategy was developed in other cities as well.
Dale. Bueno, esta es una.
This is an image because, of course, we needed support of all the different activities that were performed. And as I was stating, this was a project of joint work throughout different cities in the country. So how did we manage to work with this? Well, meetings were held through digital measures. There were no ways to have in-person meetings. We didn't have the resources for that, nor the program. And the project itself allowed us to use MBIs, such as MBS Salud in Medellin, the two health centers that have the greatest HIV population, being Sura and Sura Salud, which are again part of the health centers as a whole. So articulation, for example, of a program such as Saulas, so that the team itself could get to know that path and could give a full assessment for those of us who contacted us. Of course, this was all vital. And so that articulation and those gatherings for project presentations were needed so that everyone from those entities could tell us how they did things and everything went through the same manner. It was done again through means of digital media, emails, otherwise.
Este fue otro encuentro de articulación que tuvimos.
This was another gathering, another joint gathering that we had with Casa Afirmativa. Now, to be honest, in Colombia, there are numerous organizations that work in HIV. Many of them, of course, are clearly identified. Some others are not. But so we run into spaces such as Casa Afirmativa, which leads an organization known as Quería Afirmativo, which has also worked a lot on human rights, also sexual rights, HIV as a whole. And so in this regard, the articulation is vital because we know that there are certain sources available, and within the project, we could join people at Casa Formativa, but at Casa Formativa, they could also send people to the project as a whole, which is what we sought one way or the other. That acknowledgement of other organizations shall always allow for the service that is provided be a lot more fulfilled, understanding that the projects themselves have a certain reach. What did we do? We provided assistance, but maybe someone needed, I don't know, maybe some specific resource. We weren't working on that, but in the midst of all the work that we were doing, if we identified that need, then where could we lead people? And of course, all of that would be registered in Cisco. These are organizations regarding the different city project, a commemoration as well in Aguas, Bogota. In Medellin, it was the Fundación Raza. In the case of Cali, it was Fundamor. For Pereira, it was Fundación Plataformas. Barranquilla was Fundación Organización Acción Humanista. In Cartagena, it was Casa Amigos del Cáncer Mundial. And Bucaramanga had Corporación Consentidos. All these were organizations that truly led to a very important trajectory when it comes to HIV. And for this project, we had a summoning process in each city. And each city had organizations present themselves, and we considered which ones complied the best in order to operate with the project. And finally, these that I've mentioned were the ones that were selected. Now, initially speaking, Cartagena was not involved. The project was done 5 months, then it was for 2, and then for 1 year, because it showed to be very, very effective. And well, based on what we do as a community basis organization, it supported the work that the ministry was doing as part of the mitigation when it comes to health emergencies. Thank you very, very much.
Entonces, ahorita viene la presentación de Andrés Ortega y Ana María García. Que vienen de el territorio.
Have for our next presentation the spokespeople of El Territorio. Well, yes, hello to everyone. We want to greet everyone present as well as everyone that is here in the hall. I want to invite you to Universidad de los Andes. We want to also, of course, thank everyone for the invitation. We want to also tell you that the strategies we've applied have that we are pretty much a wide-end project to the national response for HIV, focused on vulnerability in 14 cities. We are a digital strategy with a vast component of different actions and strategies in order to eliminate the barriers that exist when it comes to accessing health services. That is why our web app at tecuidamos.com.co is a tool so that you can access the different services. You can even access it on your phone. And at the same time, it is informative and it seeks to be educational, where you'll be able to find different content. And as a matter of fact, what the previous spokesperson mentioned, we're going to have joint knowledge as well. We're going to see all the cities where the projects have been taken forth. But we can look how it works at the territory. And of course, looking at our position for actions to be developed or performed throughout the country. This is part of the services that we have within the cities. And we are to tell you a little bit more about what the app is itself, but we must have both fronts, including a mobile or web-based browser. So let's look at how different managers on the field lead to the development of activities, how these people can work hand in hand with people. So we can offer different services throughout the cities, how they can use digital means or platforms in order to approach people. We use the web app to show on a daily basis all the different ideas and plans that are effective for these different health management plans. Again, we do this through social media and health networks, and we also want to talk a little bit more about the projects in the cities. We've gone to the coffee area, Armenia, Manizales, Pereira. When it comes to the coastal area, we're in Cartagena, Barranquilla. Currently, we're looking at Cucuta as well. We want to start with Bucaramanga. It's all evident, and we're even present in Villavicencio. We're also present in Ibagué, and of course, Bogota and Cali. There are numerous actions here, and we as a project seek to make sure that our strategy on a nationwide level continue to expand and to offer not just the services, but also work with actions that within the project stem on a community basis, including research, knowledge management, and others. There's a lot of development that we've had. And, well, we're also going to talk a little bit more about where this stands and how we're going to manage these different communicative strategies and how the digital component becomes a great tool for service access for different reductions and stigmas or discrimination against those who have HIV. We see that between 2017 and 2018, we started with the basic social media that we had, which we all had access to. We know them, Facebook and Twitter. We have this great informative media piece. And then in 2019, we started working with SlideShare. SlideShare is like being a digital presenter or spokesperson, where you will most likely find digital content such as new clinical practices documents, different studies, prevalence studies for those who maybe are under drug abuse. All this new information will be there. We work hand in hand with the ministry, with communities, with investigations throughout the country. They're all found there. And from 2019 onward, well, specifically, it's during the pandemic, as mentioned by my colleagues, where the entire situation, and well, as my colleague Catalina stated, where the pandemic led to us in 2020 having a change of mindset and how we could see a need of finding tools for reaching people. It's important to do this, of course, but we also had a drive to make sure that public health not stop and that we can support ourselves, never stopping. We also see the birth of digital strategies for the tecuidamos.com.co website, which is informative and educative. And from there, we see how different alliances help us to look at all these different service orders. We see how this enters 2021 because we know that our key population uses these channels quite a lot. We know that we have a language and information. We have a way of communicating that is very proper, and it is there where we want to approach them. We want to work together. We want to offer what we have within our services, and that is how we can look at the development that we've had strive for during 2021. And strictly looking at the digital components, there's also a YouTube channel where you're going to find a lot of the information present. You're going to find videos, instructions, for example, of the organization, treatment of populations. You're going to find coordinated prevention, safe practices for oral sex, numerous different things, numerous different info that is being shared on social media. And that is never the same, but that all have the same joint component where we look at focus groups that we all have. So I also wanted to let you know that we have TikTok, Spotify, and we want to, of course, expand our content on social media. And as Katrina said, it's a lot better to get to know what this digital behavior is like. Well, thank you, and good morning. Sorry, good afternoon to each and every one of you. It's truly joyful for us to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And as my colleague Andres stated, is that, well, the entire world was forced to overcome their barriers. And by overcoming barriers, we look at new methods because through means of this app, we could expand. And the app, as the website shows, there is Te Cuidamos. It's actually a hybrid. It's a technological tool that reaches on a nationwide scale, and it provides a broader spectrum of health, focused again on management of projects. So what do we do here? So of course, how can we make sure that this reaches all people when we talk about sexual and reproductive health as well as rights? And so here we tried working with the Te Cuidamos site. We're going to show a short video clip, and quickly at the very beginning, this will help us to manage self-care. What are the different parts of autocuidado? We have quits where we'll have different information for those who have HIV, and we shared this again on a nationwide scale last year. And the quick test or home test as well are going to be shown. So let's quickly see what this web app is. And of course, it is that we have this psychosocial, social, emotional, and other social needs. This is what we've based ourselves off. Look at date and time for availability. So you can say, okay, if you need to study, if you need 10 minutes off, then you can schedule that. And now we're going to create a timestamp for all current operations nationwide so that you can share it, you can download it, you can use it. Remember, it's tecuidamos.com.co or Tecuidamos Quick Lab. And with all data, we manage, of course, high confidentiality. This is a number one priority for us. And you may also find educative content. You'll be able to see this different previous information so that you may have it present. Or an appointment, or let's say to not make sure that you lose an opportunity, you might be able to note it all down. So the idea, of course, is that you have a voice in the country and the community. Thank you. Oh, and let's go back here a little bit. And so all of this, again, leads to a hybrid technology. It is that you can look at it from your cell phone or computer if you prefer. And of course, we're also looking at the registration that you can do on the PC for the website. So it's again tecuidamos.com.co. Here, I want to also explain very briefly what it was like. So the only thing that you have to have in order to register is an email that you currently have access to. You fill out your email, you assign your own password. Please don't forget it. After that, you'll get a confirmation email, and that's it. You're done. You register yourself, you get everything set forth, and after confirmation, we finished. For example, there'll be some registration that we can see here. And the idea is that we see you can see who we are, what we do, what Andres was talking about. We have a series of, well, actually, very curious. There was a lot of things that we had before the pandemic that had to change due to it. And so we, of course, had to change our priorities. Now there are over 14 cities. So this is going to go all around the country to ask what this stigma is like. And all this educative content is visible there. It's available on YouTube as well. We invite you to look at it, to get to know about it. And of course, here we have the scheduling of appointments that are currently active. We look at, for example, the quick test for HIV. So if you want that, you can choose your services. And you can say, oh, maybe that won't be necessary. Maybe it's better in person. But for example, let's go to a place that is very well known instead. So for example, maybe going to a plaza or a club, or maybe even a university such as this one, Universidad de los Andes. Head there, or even go to a foundation. The idea is to head there and provide information on the services as well. You, of course, know that scheduling is primordial. You can just schedule on your own time.
Y bueno, esta parte de los reportes.
And well, this part of the reports is very good. In the case that on a nationwide basis, we are to look at the different goals. And to add on to this, this is the content that our managers have throughout all 14 cities. And so they map out through different activities, different areas, and different needs, what kind of offers are available or what services are required. And it is that this be provided to all throughout the city with the different offers. They have research based on each city, and that applies for decision making as well. They can see, for example, that a specific area, maybe, for example, the La Maria Hospital in Medellin, but here we see that they are complying or achieving their goals. So this leads to managing the records a lot easier. And if they're not complying with the records, then of course they can make a decision. This information is also provided in Cisco, this entire offer of services. When a person schedules a quick test, or if there's a service package, they'll upload all the information in order to have such metrics registered again for a nationwide scale. Here we also want to show you how we do so. We have our YouTube channel, for example, that is very informative. We have the Joshi animated series, where you can find different actors that are a part of the entire digital component of all actions that are developed. And here we want to also show how information is dealt on a day-to-day basis, how it's shared in social media, how we have the designing of different plans in order to offer services. We talk about Cartagena, its extension. We're also talking about the fact that you can schedule within other cities, you can contact 3 different WhatsApp lines. So on a day-to-day basis, we see these offers. And again, they're more based on where they can be found within the web app. This is an invitation to everyone who's there, or anyone that might be looking at this live feed. You can scan the QR code, which will take us to this website where you'll find, well, this front page. And here you'll have the option of downloading the app from any standard time, where we can also start providing prevention and safety procedures. We can have quick tests done. And in addition, we are going to have a record so that people can know if they qualify for the use of the service or not. And of course, we're going to prioritize each and every one of the apps. We want to, of course, have development here. For those who have vast inquiries, when it comes to accessing different services, they can have all these answers, requests, responded here. So we want to invite you to visit the website and app. It's also important that you know that we have a link tree. And here in this link, you'll find all of the links to our social media if you want to go ahead and share them. And of course, that is left to your availability. And thank you. Thank you because you are aware that we have our social media. If you want to know more about the HIV services provided, then again, we're on social media. And the idea is that you can find us. Again, as Te Cuidamos. Thank you. Well, there's something to clarify here. In your app here, you're talking about protection. Now, how many times a month can people request such protection? Up to 3 times a year. Actually, that's the rule that we have. So in our project, we have, let's say, some goals, and well, we have resources assigned per person, and there's around 3 per year. But as we know that we are not the only people that work for functions within the city, what we seek is to proceed with this. We want to, of course, mix everything together because, again, if prevention is part of that element for prevention, we see that when you're on a psychosocial level approach others, you, of course, need to be cautious. You need to have some sort of protection. So the idea is that the projects work at least 3 times a year. But we are also saying, okay, in addition to this, such as a condom, which is a very known protective or protection measure, there are other protective measures as well. And so what strategies have you thought about so that the information of the app can reach, for example, social or sexual workers? Well, as I stated, we had content focused on apps, and so communication there is a bit more direct. It's also more akin to the population, but well, we always state it within our communication, and you saw it on the form. We, for example, last year, we were present in Cartagena and other cities. Once there, as you know, Cartagena is one of the biggest cities in the country when it comes to sexual work. And with them, they assisted each house. They went to the event that we had. It was very nice. There were real people there. We didn't maybe hire the typical model that you'd expect. We just worked together always. And so we, through Instagram and social media, announced that we were going to be in Cartagena. We showed a video with examples provided by Andres. And to add on to that a little bit, and to provide a broader answer, actions in trans populations are at the site, basically. So it's our local team that does the mapping out, and that works hand in hand with our leaders and organizations in order to reach the area. We know that the trans population, as well as other populations on a national scale, for example, what Natalia stated, not everyone has access to this, or not everyone has access to internet access. You may have the device, but you don't have connectivity. Right, we understand that. Our actions are also over there on site, according to that mapping that we've done. Most likely, you've sometimes seen that. I would like to extend an invitation, and it's that you state that it seems to be quite a few, and that you've looked at different populations, such as the trans community. But still, what do we do with the rest? That's where we could start analyzing. Yes, because that would mean talking about, of course, such committees, but we need this care as well. And if we're not even provided protective measurements here, what happens? I'm a person that's been diagnosed and I've been refused protective measurements simply because I already have the disease. I show up as ill. And so it's about placing outlines. It's a very specific topic. And I mean, trans people continue dying because we live with HIV and the state doesn't help us. This year in Colombia, specifically in Medellin, this happening for 4 trans women who died at the hands of state abandonment to lack of follow-up, lack of access. And so I want to invite you to reconsider. And I know you're not the only ones working on this, but if you know about other populations involved, then let's sit down and say, okay, what are we actually going to do? Because we're not just indicators. We need the indicator to drop instead. And if we're not provided a package with testing or something like that, then we have nothing to do. Yes, you are completely right. And to correct also a little bit, the project is to amplify those actions that the state has. We're not, let's say, we wouldn't be the entity that would replace state actions, but instead we're to accompany. And so, yes, it's true that we're there and we're helping provide a response to HIV. We're never going to be the health service that people must acquire. So it's important to keep that in mind as well. But of course, your feedback, your statement is more than welcome. And these public spaces are where we are provided the opportunity. So these spaces are going to widen because we know that these proposals are accompanied with mechanisms throughout the country. And of course, the idea is that most likely you already have that inquiry on your radar. Thank you very much for saying it because, yes, it is vital to keep it in mind. Yes, this is something that's been known for years, ever since arrival of governor here, or since the arrival of the illness of HIV, it's led to the fact that, let's say, we need to send or provide condoms to gay men, but they don't give us a chance. They don't keep in mind that as a trans woman, we need protective measures as well. And we need to, of course, protect ourselves. So why does a gay man get 18 condoms, but a trans woman gets maybe 3? And many times it is that we require protection that instead we buy because institutions don't give us anything, especially now with the PrEP program. You say, okay, come here, we're giving away condoms. And so you go and, oh no, they've run out, come back later. That's what they always say. And you spend more money actually going to pick up the condoms than what they're actually used for. And again, you see that these are the ones that are affected the most by HIV. That's correct. Thank you for the intervention. And let this be another indication and advantage so that the project can grow. Regardless, we have an open invitation for those inquiries or requests. You can send them to us through means of our social media so that we can, of course, organize those ideas. Thank you. Thank you all.
Bueno, pues buenos días para todos.
Excuse me, it sounds too far away. Come on, please. We are here for the prevention and knowledge sharing of all these different topics, as well as those who have HIV. We want to, of course, talk about what our experience has been regarding the fund organization. And we saw something during the pandemic. We say, okay, we have the pandemic. I think it caught all of us by surprise. There are very few cases where we hear organizations say, oh no, we were ready. We knew what was going to happen. We were more than prepared. That doesn't happen. So the first thing here was regarding care, because of course, part of our workforce is that we are people, of course, that are part of the community, and we're people that have HIV. And so there we start looking at the fact that, well, we cannot stop giving our health services. Why? Because the first thing that we saw were that these populations that we work with needed to be found, even within exclusion, even within a pandemic and everything that was happening. So people had different issues in different areas. They ended up in a homeless situation. And we said, well, we need, of course, to see what we can do from within our homes because we were under quarantine. We also had people that suffered from HIV. And so I've had my diagnosis for 10 years, is what they would say. But again, maybe they have the secret stored for many years. No one knows, the family doesn't know. And we combine these different spaces for the community. And we see discrimination. So of course, all of this was something that we could not stop for our work. We cannot say, oh, well, we're during a pandemic, we cannot go out, so thank you, but come back later. No. We had to take action. We had to do something, and we had to generate such sensations. So that is where we started to say, okay, let's make use of psychological means instead. So the first step for us was to potentialize social media. That's why I believe that, historically speaking, ever since social media has existed, everyone uses it. However, up until the pandemic, there was an organization that had to depend strictly on social media. Well, they were very scarce, far and few between. But during the pandemic, we see that. As a matter of fact, our first social media, which was Instagram, we started to publish all sorts of information, clear information for prevention, but also information that was educative and also friendly information for users. from here, we see the power of memes, for example. It sounds dumb, I know, but people listen to memes. Seeing a meme was something that, at least for a couple of seconds, would get a reaction out of someone. On the other hand, we started working at incentives through means of YouTube. And so that is how we could start to share a step-by-step basis. We could start talking about prevention, about services, about promoting knowledge. And from here, we started seeing, oh, what's up? As a social, as a direct channel of communication for people. Here, we start seeing that people had the freedom to write to us, and we could respond with support, providing a guideline on what can or should be done. That's why we also started working on guidelines prevention. We, for many years now, developed research for those who have had HIV, which is why it's important to continue giving continuity to these groups. Why? Because effectively so, our support network is very limited, and I'm locked up in my home. I live by myself. There were even difficulties to access medication, and regardless, this represented an issue for many, many people in such a way. At the same time, getting appointments, getting checkups was difficult, especially for those who lived with couples, families, or even by themselves. Curiously speaking, here we started looking at many young men whose families did not know about their sexual orientation or diagnosis, and we started working on virtual assessments for families so that one way or the other we could undo stigmas and have different interpretations for them, and also help break those barriers so we could have different spaces and safety with a change in structure for such people. And so we saw an institutional answer. It was key for us to have different programs involved, to develop all these different actions for groups and for changes in materials and communication, as well as teaching. These were all packages that we would acquire, which one way or the other helped us grow as an institution and helped us also organize ourselves better. With Katrina, we started working on monitoring and follow-ups as well, because we said, okay, even people who, I don't know, someone who today, with it being May 11th, oh, sorry, let's say that we diagnosed someone a week ago on the 4th. So they were diagnosed, and let's say that the sequence there involved a follow-up procedure, and one way or the other, we needed to go over it. Now, funny enough, this is where we as an institution started to develop our own projects, and through means of technological means proceeded. Now, we continued working forward, and the project was, of course, involved collaboration, such as the ones from Arturo, which allowed us to have different teams so that we could develop our work, we could have different communication channels again set up. We also worked with the Swiss Council. We had support regarding different knowledge, prevention, etc. So we pretty much had an initiative that was presented before, but that initiative must go hand in hand with, of course, an incentive that comes from social media itself. Now, all of this leads to us seeing that we have a constant on social media through means of Instagram, for example, and we see that we currently have more than 6,000 followers, of which, well, we're giving too much information right now. We continue managing strategies that are very, very nice for those of us who are familiar with us. Many of them, again, can be seen through memes. But once you start following us, you start looking at this insight, you start looking at social media, and we start looking at interesting data regarding prevention, regarding aid, regarding, for example, oral and anal sex, about prostate, and well, all of this can be seen. Now, funnily enough, we have expanded a bit on an international level. Currently, we see that there are opportunities for us to work with organizations in other countries, and this is how we're going to have different coordinations done. If we're going to talk about the use of maybe different protection and what kind of experiences we can share on an international basis, as well as providing a response, which on a humanitarian and social manner is being shared as well. And through WhatsApp, we've fully set up our own representative that is always connected from 8 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon, in which, well, anyone can send a message. Well, they'll have support, of course. Regardless, if you maybe have a request that is more specific or you require professional consultants, then you can be guided on that platform to reach those health professionals or social workers that you may require. And so we're going to have mixed service here. We continue providing virtual support networks as we see that there are many people here who do not feel safe enough to share their diagnosis, or that we just want to give a space where they can say, well, yes, I have HIV. And of course, we can continue working on undoing the stigmas. But within this same expansion, we see that we have national level productions here. And before the pandemic, we saw that it was being published somewhere else, but now we have Bogota, Cali, Barranquilla. And thanks to different technologies that we have, we've seen that people from Medellin can contact us, people from Pereira, from Cucuta can all contact us, and many times they prefer to keep this on a virtual level. Let's say that our system, of course, seeks to provide the best available service possible on a safe network, while of course working based on the commodity of the individual, making sure that they feel safe, sound, and comfortable in the areas or in the platform. And while this has allowed us to develop everything regarding digital expensiveness for our services, we can continue developing as an organization. And currently, we see that, I believe in June, everything regarding our systems will be ready on a digital level. This means that we'll be able to upload medical stories, aid, those who are to provide services will be able to provide their aid as well. And people themselves will be able to have that digital footprint with our webpage. Effectively so, we work with Cisco, which is one of the better platforms as well. We also work with other platforms onward, but we are working on developing our website by the end of this month. We're going to have closing of our pilot program, and it's established here for the 18 to 24 age period to make sure that it be friendly. Through means of this app, people will be able to access information regarding prevention, care, and funny enough, they themselves requested that it be an interactive platform. So there will be different Q&A areas and forums where the public will be able to access and look at different topics. And from here, they'll be able to connect in matters saying, okay, there's an inquiry I have that no one can answer. No one that I know of, at least. But they can get on here, and it's completely anonymous and confidential. And from there, they'll have the possibility of running into a map that have different territories that can directly access these services. So let's see that maybe you run into a topic that people are not comfortable speaking with others, but on the same roadmap, we can help them interact. And of course, have connections stating who has access and who can we have support with. The idea, of course, is that we protect ourselves on a technological scale. When we talk about projects, we of course want to talk on an international scale as well. And we see that there's a system for the medical industry that will be generated. And for migration pathways as well, in which everyone should be able to access authorized networks within their countries. And for example, if I'm here right now, but I'm living in Ecuador, then when I get to Ecuador, my information will remain the same. You will be able to access my medical history, and in that regard, they'll also be able to continue from the networks, even if it's in a different country. On the other hand, and even though it's been stated before, we are currently working on the next phase of what will be our steps here, looking specifically at a same platform project that has national coverage and initiatives, especially with youngsters, and of course, establishing the work on social weaknesses. This is part of the information that we had. Again, you can access more information from our website, and you can find us connected all the time. You're more than welcome to visit us, find us on social media or the website. Everything is connected. Everything goes together. Thank you. Here we also have part of the research team led by Katarina. They have to present themselves. Good afternoon to everyone. Once again, we're looking at different human rights. And well, I want to extend a cordial thank you to all the work that was allowed to be done. We've talked about being a team on a global scale. And everything has been coordinated through the Kumbak Never Institute, as well as here at Universidad de los Andes. We've been having this growing network. And so what we see here, well, give me one moment, please. What we're going to present here are the results of this investigative research. That's about a year, a bit more than a year long. And we had preliminary results, or results that were taken directly from participative committees during their initial phase of research. Others joined later, but here we see numerous questions that came up. However, today, I want to ask about 5 different topics. And, well, highlighted as well. We talked about focal groups in Medellin, specifically 4. We had 2 in Bogota as well. There were 33 youngsters in general that we have in the focus groups in Medellin and in Bogota. We also had the possibility of interviewing 32 people, all activists and leaders of communities. These are people that have different strategies set forth, and so they are present during this research. I think it's important to highlight that within all this trajectory of, well, almost everything, we look at different platforms. We want to emphasize on digital health instead of digital tools. We see that, for example, the National Health Assembly in 2020 implemented a global strategy for digital health, which basically allowed us to having mandate, which would allow to have our own experience and management for each country. But again, the UN has implemented and stimulated the means of different areas, and through AI, they've looked at the development of sustainable development without keeping in mind the vast amount of digital means or measures that come from the private sector. There's a lot of investment there. And so there's something key here. And it's that almost none of them have truly taken into consideration what they've done, including the risks. We've talked about these barriers before. We have, of course, low risk, but we also have huge risks, such as violation of privacy, but well, it's called nowadays an algorithm. Basically, what an algorithm does is focus all the information of a person or a group of people to send it to another one. But also, media has become something that leads to free bullying, which of course affects in different manners all throughout. This, of course, without talking about the actual system that we have for surveillance. We give away data to be surveyed on. They give us more information on products, etc. Or the organism of data, basically, international companies come, be it Frances, Google, etc. They give us data and sell us or try to sell us over 20 products of things that we've mentioned. So what we believe with all these different bodies are that they need to generate policies or ideas that be practical and that can lead to human rights. And we also believe that these results have simply this project which will help cover that need, that there'll be a human rights basis when we talk about digital norms. And there are 5 different small points here. I won't go over each and every one of them because I do want to have a Q&A session, but we're going to talk about that idea of, well, Catalina mentioned concepts of digital health, but once again, that idea of what is digital health? What do we mean by it? Particularly, we're going to talk about the importance of different support groups as well, which I found was very interesting. And these different versions of privacy, as well as the need to have an intersectional management for digital means. We're going to cover all that.
Dale clic.
Bueno, no importa. Igual, cuando hablamos de...
And
Bueno, no importa. Cuando hablamos de Google, cuando hablamos de
when we
información...
talk about Google, when we talk about digital information, the first thing we see is Google. And what happens with Google is that Google, if you look for a diagnosis on Google, Google says you're going to die, always. But it is that people have access to information. And here there's something that is extremely interesting. And it's that at least those who have HIV have sophisticated manners of looking for information. That is not just Google. So they try to extract information that be true, useful, usable, etc. What does this lead to? This leads to us asking ourselves, okay, is it necessary to generate a strategy so that everyone can have the possibility of having the same valid source of information that be usable, that be true, that we can fight against misinformation? On the other hand, this question or inquiry states that there are groups with less possibility of interacting. And this is something that we must attempt together. Why? Because, well, we state that the youngsters find things on internet all throughout. But we see that these specific groups of people who have HIV have a more difficult time interacting. And so I want to highlight that as well. Now, at some point in time of the presentation, we're going to have an exercise which was delivering some pages to the staff, be it police, government, their significant other, relative, etc. And what we want to see here is ways of understanding safety and privacy. Here, the first result was that we're going to say, okay, we won't be able to do anything with this. We deliver the data and research, and that's it, we're done. The second one was saying, okay, we don't want for the police to come here under any reason at all. That's clear. But while doing the exercise, we found that in different focus groups that we had, this map that we have here expands. And so what we understood from different groups was that information could be found in different manners. This opened up a door of possibilities, of course, that idea of safety and privacy from within different groups in different measures and ways, each passing day lessens. And so we found three very interesting things here as well. Of course, looking at data encryption is not one of them. And the idea is that they not be necessary, but there are other ways in which we can understand safety. The first one is that the cell phone that I have, is it really my phone? Is it really mine? Is it just mine? Is it exclusive to me? My home. Can I openly speak about anything at home or with my doctor if they give me a call? Does that exist? Can I? That's safety. Because it's supposed to be only between the doctors. And there we're talking about, again, a lack of privacy. The second part is looking where the information goes to. Who gets it? Who is provided our information through means of automated procedures? For example, with health centers, we see that information regarding who's a parent, who's a grandparent, who's an uncle, etc., also reaches different destinations without actually looking into it or without having consentment of the person themselves, which of course opens up possibilities of invasion of privacy and of course invasion of sexual information. I think it's interesting to know that it's concerning to know where my data is going through and where I'm delivering or to who I'm giving away my data. This opens up different questions of knowing who uses my data and why do they use them? What's their purpose? And of course, the idea that they share their voices with users, stating how their data effectively is used or not. We found numerous instances in which we state or expose data. And this, of course, can lead to discrimination. It can be all sorts of data, such as a diagnosis. We see that there's discrimination, there's bullying, and there are sometimes ways of actually getting that information out there that are pretty effective. So we consider that companies work for all this. Finally, when we talk about access to data, we talk about the fact that, for example, for all youngsters, access to data implies empowerment or more free time. They can get all of this if they hide away the fact that they are HIV positive or that they're trans. So the idea is that they not be victimized. It's one way of them avoiding that entire procedure. And of course, hiding data. And finally, It may be easier with the same groups, but if there seems to be a breach that is mentioned, we of course want to talk about treating them, want to undo these barriers or breaches. We know that, of course, health services can be provided through virtual means, through apps, etc., or through platforms, but not everyone has access to or knowledge of these different platforms or services provided. We're talking about a loss or denial to health services. Thank you.
Si hay preguntas, comentarios respecto de cualquiera de las presentaciones.
Sí, teníamos pensado hacer un panel.
We had considered holding another panel, but due to the way that we've managed it so far,
Yo sé que ahora tiene un problema.
anyone have a question?
Someone else can go faster.
No, you can talk and we will translate. It's okay.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, hola everyone. I'm Alan from Kenya, and a partner to Elena, Javier, and all the amazing team that's doing this work. Thank you so much for the presentation. Okay.
Hola, buenas tardes a todos, a todas. Soy Alan, vengo de Kenia, soy aliado de este grupo de Catalina y las invitadas que ya conocieron.
I've enjoyed the presentations,
He disfrutado mucho las presentaciones,
especially for the colleagues who are providing services using digital platforms.
especialmente las de los y las colegas que están prestando servicios utilizando plataformas digitales.
My questions are not as tough as the ones that came from the community.
Mis preguntas, las que tengo más, son las sobre temas que vienen de las comunidades.
But I wanted to find out the data you collect.
Pero quiero conocer los datos que ustedes recolectan.
How do you keep it safe
¿Cómo los mantienen seguros?
so that it doesn't leak
De manera que no se filtre esa información
to other people who can be a problem to the community?
a otras personas que pueden constituir un problema para esas comunidades.
I think it's important for you to think about that
Creo que es importante que ustedes piensen en eso,
so that you can build the trust of the community
de manera que puedan desarrollar esa confianza de la comunidad
for them to feel safe to use your services.
para que ellos se sientan seguros cuando utilicen sus servicios.
And maybe one suggestion I would like to make
Y tal vez una sugerencia que quiero hacer
is to see how closely you work with, of course, lawyers,
es que ver qué tan estrechamente trabajan ustedes, por supuesto, con abogadas,
or if you have in Colombia the Office of the Data Protection or Data Commissioner, someone in government who's supposed to protect people's data.
o si tienen en Colombia algo así como la Oficina de la Protección de la Información, de la Información de Datos, o algo así como un comisionado de la protección de los datos que se dedique a eso, a proteger la información.
So that's one question and comment. The other one is, someone had a Global Fund logo in their slide.
Esa es una pregunta y un comentario. La otra es, ¿alguien tenía en las diapositivas el logotipo del Fondo Global?
Yeah, does anyone get funded by the Global Fund, and what does that involve? Because
Eso significa que los está financiando el Fondo Global y pregunto por qué. ¿Y qué implicaciones tiene? Y pregunto por qué.
because it will be good to discuss with the Global Fund whether they can fund work for you,
Valdría la pena discutir qué es lo que puede hacer el Fondo Global, si en realidad puede financiar el trabajo que ustedes hagan.
That helps the community you work with and your staff members to know more about digital rights, safety, and protection.
Ayude a la comunidad a enterarse y a conocer más sobre esos derechos digitales para que esto sirva en materia de protección y de seguridad de la información.
I'll stop here for now.
De momento voy a parar aquí
Otherwise, I'll speak the whole afternoon and that will be boring.
porque no hablé toda la tarde, ya sería muy aburrido.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias, Alan. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Alan, for the question and comment as well. And from the project and from the resources that the country has received, we have certain actions directed towards everything regarding HIV and what stems from it. In addition, for our health services, we do have actions in order to reduce this stigma and stimulation as well as support. So we have developed actions such as different press conferences for people who are sexually diverse. We support actions for transgender people as well, as we mentioned a moment ago within our research, documents, and studies. All of these different resources are supported not just for sexual health, but a broad range of health itself. All these different actions lead to coordination within the country and joint work where numerous people are present within the territory. And in regard to confidentiality, everyone who accesses the services, be it health or others, or with the country, sign a consent form. They sign a consent form in which we state what the procedure and information management will be like, where it will be headed toward, what can be expected, and how the Ministry of Health will manage it as well. And that is how we manage confidentiality as a whole. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any other questions regarding to what is it? Yes, I just want to talk about confidentiality. It's managed on numerous levels. However, I mean, when we talk about knowledge, we say that it's not just for the person that gets a diagnosis, but there's already a spreading of information. And if that information leaks, or if, I mean, that happens and has happened a lot on virtual measures where information is leaked. And so I don't believe too much in confidentiality that is managed, be it virtual or in person, because there have been cases in which confidentiality is non-existent. And so let's say that there is quite a bit of conflict there. Up until where or how far are you willing to go for your confidentiality? Well, of course, we understand that can be a real case scenario. We want to make sure that people can feel safe in different areas, and maybe they don't feel safe in others. That can happen, of course. It's a very important topic. And of course, as my fellow colleague stated, we talk about confidentiality within platforms. And as you saw, you register yourself, you sign up yourself. So you, of course, have the right to have confidential data. But yes, it's a very interesting topic, looking at how data is managed or how you can treat confidential data. Of course, to continue focusing on everything regarding that confidentiality. Yes, I mean, confidentiality is difficult to obtain. Even if we're talking on financial level, it's difficult. And so in the case of health, I think it's very sensitive. I think that we have a topic here where we have to truly understand what we're getting into. And the idea is that even if we have good networks, we won't have leaks. Well, you know what, to add on to what you've stated, maybe I want to state that maybe you have a diagnosis and there's a specific point of area here, but this is where we manage data throughout the entire health system within the country. So we authorize getting information to get to know who or which area you belong to. So maybe your idea involves getting called the third day and it's impacting for you, but we have a positive diagnosis. And it is that we teach the person up until administration and benefits. And we see this with how we share information. That's why the Cisco platform exists. But maybe the example that you've stated regarding other areas or changes on this path is completely valid. We received the information here, and maybe when we talk about health in the territory, it's very well. It has us being very, very, very cautious. We must be even more cautious if we are to maintain confidentiality, as stated. Now, those cases of leakage don't really happen, but it's important to keep it in mind. To have a question, in my opinion, I think everything regarding digital health is vital. I'd like to know if soon we may have a platform and also get to know what the process is going to be like for communities that are separated from urban areas. Here in Colombia, for example, the Amazon areas, looking at, for example, Guaju communities, and part of the population that is not just a marginal population that has privacy deprived, no, but how could you reach them as well? Another of the things that I would like to, and I believe is re-victimizing, is that we be a focus group. I mean, it's about us and us and us. With you, we do this and that. No, no, no. We have to take this to cisgender people as well that have the higher index of illnesses because they truly are the ones that have these issues. And this is spread around, not just talking about STDs, but illnesses as a whole. So that is my reflection, and I hope that I could be part of that in this project, that we can transform the way we talk so that we can also get to know what is going on or what needs to happen. All right, and one last thing. So I have two inquiries. The first one is, well, you say that there's not a lot of budget, right? Let's say that the budget is split fairly, and excuse me if I'm wrong. Who leads these organizations with these different resources or assets? That would be my first question. The second question, I believe, is completely dedicated to what my colleague stated, and it's something regarding homes and sorry, prisons, and not just your ordinary prison, but also areas where we are held temporarily. And for example, it was the case of a public university in Medellin that a person touched over thousands of doors, had a 6-month diagnosis in the University of Medellin, and it was almost impossible to get help. They had to wait over 2 weeks to get something, even though their diagnosis was already placed. And there was no support, neither from City Hall nor professors, because the person stated that it was difficult to enter the university. So how are we going to work toward these places? Maybe you have more safety in a prison. Ironically, we have maybe the registered nurse that helps us get the location, but in these temporal spaces in which we live basically or cohabit, what do we do? How do you manage or plan on managing that? Because I mean, it's sad, and I don't want for another death to take place, which for me is homicide, and the state is responsible. We're abandoned and forgotten. They say, okay, you broke a law, so whatever, you're not worth anything, so just go ahead and die. And so someone dies, and then we say, oh, it's so sad. A trans person died in prison from HIV, but it never says that the state never helped them or treated them or gave them the priority that they should have had. And something else that is confidentiality in these areas. You say that one of the responses I received was that the person didn't tell me. No, no, no. I mean, I'm right next to 15 trans people. How will I know if they're xenophobic or transphobic or no, no, how would I know? No, no, no. There's no way to know that unless they let it be known. Where's confidentiality in these areas? And the psychosocial age, because this person ended up cutting themselves because they could no longer handle the pressure. Their diagnosis was publicly known in an area where they are considered to be free, but instead that person could not go out of fear of being harmed. That person was exposed to mere homicide at the hands of other human beings. So what would we do? Hey, I want to add onto that, into the conversation, then Cindy and then you. And one of the things that we saw while doing the validation of results was that people said, hey, I know that organizations and companies have a clear idea, but it would seem as if it was more about willingness because there's no actual entity or body that could manage or survey this. So mostly it has to do with the goodwill of organizations, but how do you know of the goodwill of the employees or who has access to data or what happens with data after it's handed over? So that's something worth thinking about as well. Cindy, and then you. She's too far away for me to understand what she's saying. It's very important that we present such increase as well as needs. Looking at everything that has to do with health rights on an organizational level. But right now, we need to formulate a strategy that would be effective. But of course, the intention would be to take it and discuss about it. The idea is that we can take this on a global scale. And so it is that we have resources delivered, of course, that they be provided. They need to do all the management of the country. And they need to make sure that one of the responses in each and every one of the limitations be looked at. And that they can represent areas. But there's also a person there that, for example, works with Easy Action, that has HIV, and each and every one of them leads to civil society, and it is there where we must strive to work together. But that's the thing, the lack of implementation. Of saying, of course, and that's understandable. But you're part of a process in which you would, as a trans woman, you'd have to indulge yourself in a process, inform someone else, and of course, trust in others. You know, I think that's a really good question because, thank you. This would allow us to get to know what happened in the case of another pandemic or a war. I think it's very interesting. Someone who lives in Bogota, for example, in San Cristobal or Ciudad Bolivar, that has to go and move all around so that they can get their exams done. It's not just about that, but also it's a psychological process that is required. And it's nice to know that, for example, within digital health through means of platforms or social media, it could be virtual, yes, and that you don't have to actually go from one far away area to another, because in other cities, that would be like traveling, what would I say, from Ibagué to Manizales. No, sorry, closer, from Ibagué to Armenia or Pereira. That is what we would see, of course. And we also see how in the future, since the project is still underway and the research would also continue to reach these areas as well, it would be good to also provide this basically with safety protocols so that everyone that has this information could always be trustworthy. And more than that, so that, for example, a group of engineers make it unhackable because, well, you know, there's evil everywhere, that it be unhackable, that no one could reach it at all. And not just that, look what's happening with an example. We need to reach isolated areas in Colombia, and there's, of course, confidential information involved. And it's not just about making it unhackable, but also making sure that those who receive the information do their job and avoid some sort of toxic situation. And of course, that may alter responses just because they refuse to do their work at all. So we have to look at all these different alternatives in order to provide help and make sure that these projects grow and be safer in the future. I think that we have to look at AI for this as well. And potential exists, what good things and what bad things can come from it as well. Very well. Does anyone have anything else to state?
This is a good conversation. Let me stick to the global fund because I know a bit about the global fund. So the money that was made available during COVID, specific to COVID activities, are for those who sit on the body that represents different communities. I think you need to have the conversation at the country level, whether all that money has been used or not. Because from my reading of the reports of the Global Fund, many countries across the world did not use all the money they were given for COVID-specific issues.
Dice muy buena la muy buena, es que no quiero dejar nada. Excelente la conversación, pero quiere seguir hablando específicamente de lo del Fondo Global. Dice, los recursos que proporcionó el Fondo Global durante la emergencia tenían por objeto específicamente invertirse en esas actividades y en esos tratamientos relacionados con la pandemia. Dice, debían usarlo las comunidades y los grupos a los que estaban dirigidas. Dice que a partir de su lectura de los informes, la imagen que queda o la impresión que queda es que no, los recursos no siempre se utilizaron para esa finalidad que era tratar la enfermedad de la COVID-19, etcétera. Eso quería traerlo a colación.
So it may be, I mean, so check if that money is still available.
Hay que verificar que ese dinero todavía esté a disposición.
And for those who represent the communities on the country mechanism, I don't know what you call it here, we call it CCM.
Para quienes representan a esas comunidades que forman parte del mecanismo nacional, no sé cómo lo llaman aquí, nosotros lo llamamos CCM.
They can try to find out if that money can be reprogrammed to do the things they're asking for here.
Pueden averiguar si es posible reprogramar ese dinero para que termine invirtiéndose en las cosas que se necesita hacer aquí.
Because then that can help address some of the concerns the colleagues in the room are raising about could we have more trainings, could we reach more people? So I think that's a conversation to explore.
Así sería posible abordar algunas de las dudas, preocupaciones y preguntas que tienen las y los colegas que están aquí en el salón para ver si ese dinero pudiera utilizarse para abordar esas cuestiones, como podemos llegar a más personas, podemos tratar a más personas, valdría la pena explorar esa posibilidad.
And lastly, for our colleagues from the community, either trans, women living with HIV, men who have sex with men.
Y por último, para las personas que forman parte de nuestras comunidades, las presentes, trátese de personas trans, trátese de hombres que tienen relaciones sexuales con hombres, trátese de personas que viven con VIH.
You need to know who your representative is on the CCM.
Es necesario saber quién es su representante en esos CCM.
You need to answer those hard questions you're asking here.
Y es necesario que les hagan esas preguntas a ellos, esas preguntas que están haciendo aquí.
Because it's their work to sit there, fight for the community.
Porque el deber de ellos es eso, luchar por la comunidad.
And get resources to go to the communities to do the work that they need to do.
Y asegurarse que los recursos vayan a la comunidad para que se haga el trabajo que es preciso hacer.
Given the world is political,
Y dado que esto es algo político,
strategize among yourselves
hacer estrategias entre ustedes
and see if one of you could get to be on the CCM.
y ver si alguna o alguno puede lograr un puesto ahí en el comité.
So that you bring the change yourself.
Para que sean ustedes los que produzcan el cambio.
Well, I don't know if anyone has any closing statements or questions. All right, well, thank you very, very much to each and every single one of you. To those of us listening to our session live as well, thank you very much for going online with us. And please, we'll be sharing this information with you as well.
Bueno, una cosa interesante es que en estos días